He brushed past me at the open house and called the realtor babe under his breath right before asking about our sale. I let him talk. I even let him schedule a private showing. I already knew the one fact that would erase his smirk: the deed had only ever carried one name, mine. By the time he learned it at the closing table, the room went silent. The pen froze in mid-air, and the compliance officer reached for the phone. My name is Mara Whitaker, and I thought I knew the man I married. 7 years into our marriage, Derek and I had built what looked like the perfect life in Boulder. Our mid-century home sat perched on the hillside, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the flatirons. Every Saturday morning, we'd hit the farmer's market on Pearl Street, his hand on my lower back as we navigated between stalls of organic kale and artisanal honey. Sunday trail runs up Chautauqua. Wednesday wine on the deck, reviewing sketches for the backyard renovation we'd been planning since spring. I was head of strategy at Northbridge Creative Group, pulling long hours but loving the intellectual challenge. Derek managed sales at Everline Components, a stable position that let him leave by 5:30 most days. We had our rhythms, our routines, our shared Google Calendar color-coded with dinner reservations and client entertaining. The shift started subtly. Derek began leaving real estate listings on the kitchen counter, modern constructions in Superior, new developments in Louisville. "We should upgrade," he'd say, running his finger along the marble countertop we'd installed just last year. "This place was perfect for starting out, but we need something that matches where we're going." Where we're going, as if our current home, purchased with my grandmother's inheritance 3 years after we married, was merely a stepping stone. "The market's cooling," I'd respond, not looking up from my laptop. "Let's wait until spring." But Derek had already made contact with a realtor. Sloan Avery from Blue Key Realty. Her business card appeared on his desk one Tuesday. Embossed letters catching the afternoon light. Blonde, early 30s, specialized in luxury transitions. According to her LinkedIn profile, I pulled up that evening. "She's got pocket listings," Derek explained when I asked. "Properties that never hit MLS. We should at least look." The first showing was a Thursday evening in October. I'd rushed from a strategy session, still in my work clothes, to find Derek already there with Sloan. She wore a cream-colored suit that looked painted on, her heel clicks echoing through the empty house as she guided us room to room. "Derek mentioned you're looking to elevate your lifestyle," she said, addressing him more than me. "This property offers that prestige factor." I watched my husband's hand hover near the small of her back as she led us upstairs, watched him lean in when she spoke, the way his eyes tracked her movements, the familiarity in how she touched his arm when laughing at his jokes I'd heard 1,000 times, but that suddenly seemed fresh to her. "We should list quickly," Derek announced on the drive home. "Sloan says the market's perfect for our property type. Modern buyers want turnkey, not renovation potential. Our property, our sale. As if the deed wasn't sitting in my filing cabinet, bearing only my name on the Whitaker Living Trust, a detail my attorney aunt had insisted on when I'd used my inheritance for the down payment. Derek had been at a conference that week, hadn't even read the paperwork before our life in that house began. Text messages started appearing on his phone at odd hours. The screen would light up face down on his nightstand, lockbox code for tomorrow at 10:45 p.m. "We should celebrate when we close with champagne emojis at midnight." I began documenting everything. Screenshots when he'd leave his phone charging. Photos of receipts for client dinners that matched the address of Blue Key Realty's office. The afternoon he said he was showing our house to a qualified buyer, but his location services placed him at a wine bar in Denver. Still, I smiled. Still, I asked about his day. Still, I let him believe I was the wife who'd sign whatever papers he put in front of me. Because I'd learned something about revenge in my 34 years, it's not about the explosion. It's about the quiet click of pieces falling into place. The moment when someone realizes the ground they thought was solid has been hollow all along. Derek wanted a sale I'd give him a showing he'd never forget. The pattern emerged like developing film in a darkroom, slow at first, then suddenly sharp and undeniable. Derek's phone lived face down now, a black mirror reflecting nothing. When notifications chimed during dinner, his hand would snake across the table, flip it over just enough to glimpse the screen, then return to his fork as if nothing had happened. "Client stuff," he'd mutter, cutting into his steak. "You know how it is." I did know. That's why I started paying attention to the parking garage receipts that fluttered from his wallet. Blue Key Realty's office building, time-stamped at 2:15 p.m., 3:45 p.m., once at 6:20 p.m., always during his supposed client meetings, never matching his official calendar. Sloane's perfume began haunting our house like a ghost. Tom Ford's Black Orchid. I recognized it from the Nordstrom counter. It clung to his jacket collar, his car's passenger seat, the throw pillow he'd absently moved when he came home late one Wednesday. Our shared Google Calendar became a work of fiction. Showing with qualified buyers at noon turned into extended lunches I could track through credit card alerts. Property evaluation at 4 p.m., aligned perfectly with a charge at the Crawford Hotel's rooftop bar. Derek had grown careless, or maybe he simply believed I wasn't looking. The text messages escalated. I glimpsed them when he'd shower, leaving his phone charging on the bathroom counter. "The pocket listing is perfect for us. Can't wait to close this deal. Your wife doesn't need to know about the pre-inspection." My wife, not by name, just a role, an obstacle to navigate around. I pulled the deed from our filing cabinet one evening while Derek was at another showing. The paper felt substantial between my fingers, weighted with more than just legal significance. Whitaker Living Trust, dated 3 years prior. Sole beneficiary and trustee, Mara Elizabeth Whitaker. My Aunt Patricia's voice echoed from that afternoon at the title company. "Keep it separate, honey. Colorado's an equitable distribution state, but inherited assets stay yours if you're smart about it." Derek had been in Phoenix that week, closing some deal he'd deemed more important than our house closing. He'd given me power of attorney to sign, never reviewing the final documents, never noticing that his name appeared nowhere except as spouse on the mortgage application, and even that was just for credit verification. "I found cash buyers," Derek announced one Thursday night, practically vibrating with excitement. "All cash, quick close, no contingencies. Sloane says they'll take it as is for 20% above market." 20% above market, for a house that wasn't his to sell. "That's interesting," I said, loading the dishwasher with deliberate calm. "When did they tour? Private showing this afternoon. You were at your strategy session." My strategy session. The one I'd canceled to work from home, watching from my office as Derek led Sloane and a younger couple through our backyard, his hand finding the small of her back every time they paused to admire a view. "We should move fast," he continued. "Sloane's drawing up the paperwork. She says we can use DocuSign. Make it easy." Easy, as if selling a home was like ordering takeout, as if my signature was just a formality, a rubber stamp on his decision. That night, I lay awake listening to Derek's breathing, studying the ceiling beams my grandmother's money had paid for. He shifted in his sleep, mumbling something that sounded like listing agreement. His phone buzzed on the nightstand 2:37 a.m. Even in the dark, I could see Sloane's name on the screen. I thought about the trust documents locked in my office safe, about the notice of non-consent to convey I could file with the county, about how Derek had never once asked to see the deed, had simply assumed that marriage meant joint ownership, that his name naturally belonged on everything mine. The assumption would cost him. But first, I needed to see how far he'd go, how deep this deception ran. Every text, every receipt, every hushed phone call was evidence. Not for Court Colorado was no-fault divorce anyway, but for the moment when Derek would sit at a closing table, pen in hand, ready to sign away something that was never his. I smiled in the darkness. Sloane might have been selling him on a future, but I owned the present. And possession, as they say, is 9/10 of the law. The other 10th, that was about to become very educational for both of them. I met Talia Perez for coffee at Boxcar on Pearl Street, choosing a corner table where the espresso machine's hiss would mask our conversation. We'd known each other since our MBA program at CU Boulder, and she'd since built a reputation as one of the sharpest divorce attorneys in the county. "I need a referral," I said, sliding my phone across the table. "Not for what you think. Property law." She scrolled through my screenshots, text messages, receipts, calendar discrepancies, her expression shifting from curiosity to something harder. "Jesus, Mara. How long?" "2 months that I can prove. Maybe longer." "And the house?" "Whitaker Living Trust. My name only." Talia's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "He's trying to sell property he doesn't own. That's not just stupid, it's potentially fraudulent." She pulled out her phone. "Janine Rhodes and Merrill. She'll eat this for breakfast." Janine's office occupied the top floor of a building overlooking the Flatirons, all clean lines and legal gravitas. She reviewed my documents with the intensity of a surgeon planning an incision. "Your instincts are correct," she said, aligning the deed with the trust documents. "No confrontation yet. Let them dig deeper. The more steps they take toward this sale, the clearer the pattern becomes. What about protecting the asset? We file a notice of non-consent to convey with Boulder County. Quietly. It won't show up unless someone specifically pulls title." She made a note. "Update your trust documentation to explicitly exclude any spousal claims. Open individual accounts. Start segregating finances." And Derek continues to believe what he believes until the moment of maximum impact. I left her office with a leather folder of documents and a strategy as precise as a Swiss watch. No emotional explosions, no confrontations in the kitchen, just paperwork, filed quietly in government offices, creating a legal wall Derek wouldn't see until he walked into it. The notice of non-consent was filed that afternoon at 3:20 p.m. The clerk barely glanced up, just stamped and filed. Such a mundane action to undermine everything Derek thought he was building. I opened new accounts at First Bank, transferring my salary deposits effective immediately. Canceled the credit card Derek used for his client entertainment. Created what Janine called a data room, a secure digital folder housing every screenshot, every receipt, every piece of evidence that Derek was attempting to sell my house while sleeping with his realtor. "The goal isn't the divorce," Janine had explained. "That's straightforward in Colorado. The goal is preventing the sale and documenting the attempt. If he's willing to forge your signature or misrepresent ownership, that's criminal." That evening, Derek came home buzzing with energy. Takeout bags from Boulder Dushanbe Tea House in hand, my favorite, a peace offering for all his recent late meetings. "Sloan thinks we can close by month's end," he said, unpacking lamb kebabs. "The buyers are motivated. Tech couple from California, paying cash." "That's fast," I said, accepting the container he handed me. "That's the point. Strike while it's hot." He pulled out his phone, showed me a DocuSign email. "Look, she's already got the listing agreement ready. You can sign from your phone. Easy." I looked at the document on his screen. Our address at the top. Sloan Avery listed as agent. A signature line for Mara Lawson, not even my legal name. "I'll review it after dinner," I said. "You know I don't sign anything without reading it." "Of course." But his jaw tightened. "Just don't wait too long. The buyers might walk." Let them walk. Let them run. The house wasn't for sale. Later, while Derek showered, I forwarded the DocuSign to Janine with a single question: attempted fraud. Her response came quickly: "Getting warmer. Don't sign. Let him escalate." Through the bathroom door, I could hear Derek on the phone, his voice low but urgent. "She's being difficult about the paperwork. No, she doesn't know about us. I'll handle it. The closing will happen, babe. Trust me." Trust. Such a fragile word. Also, coincidentally, the legal structure that protected my house from his deception. I pulled up the Whitaker Living Trust on my laptop, reading through the provisions my aunt had insisted upon. Sole beneficiary, no spousal rights without written amendment. Every word now felt like armor, protecting not just property, but the future Derek was trying to steal and sell. Tomorrow, Janine would contact Blue Key Realty's broker in charge. A friendly heads up about title issues. She'd called it professional courtesy before the explosion. But tonight, I sat at my kitchen table, in my house, watching my husband plan its sale with his mistress, and I felt nothing but calm. The trap was set. All Derek had to do was walk into it. And he would. They always do when they think they're the ones in control. Caleb Thorne didn't look like a private investigator, more like a programmer from one of Boulder's tech startups' flannel shirt, craft coffee, MacBook Pro, which was exactly why he was perfect. Corporate intelligence and personal matters, he'd said during our first meeting at the Cup on Broadway. Mostly tech executives worried about IP theft, but domestic situations pay the bills. I need documentation, I'd told him. Not suspicion. Proof. The proof came faster than expected. Within a week, Caleb had photos from the Flagstaff House parking lot Derek's Audi parked beside Sloane's white Mercedes at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Security footage from the Boulderado Hotel showing them entering together at 4:15 p.m., leaving at 6:43 p.m. Credit card records showing adjoining charges at Frasca Food and Wine, time-stamped 3 minutes apart. "They're getting careless," Caleb observed, sliding a folder across my desk at Northbridge. "Want me to keep going?" "Everything," I said. "Especially anything about the house sale." The intelligence Caleb gathered painted a picture of staggering presumption. Derek and Sloane meeting with the supposed buyers at Corita on Pearl Street. Derek spreading property photos across the table like playing cards, promising a closing date he had no authority to set. Sloane's laptop screen, captured from 2 tables away, showing a net sheet calculating commission on my house 6% of an inflated price, split between her and her broker. But the most damaging evidence came from Sloane's own email, forwarded accidentally to Derek's work account instead of his personal one, then retrieved by Caleb through means I didn't ask about. "D, the staging company can start Monday. Tell M we're doing routine showing prep. I've got the DocuSign set up for her signature. Once she signs, we can backdate the listing agreement to last month for tax purposes. The buyers are getting antsy, but I told them we'd have clear title by closing. Can't wait to celebrate our first deal together. S. Our first deal. Backdate documents. Clear title they didn't have." "This crosses from infidelity into conspiracy," Janine said when I showed her the email. "They're actively planning to circumvent your ownership." She drafted a letter to Blue Key Realty's broker in charge, a man named Harrison Webb, whose license number I'd verified with the Colorado Division of Real Estate. Professional, factual, devastating. "Dear Mr. Webb, I am the sole owner of the property at address, held in trust as evidenced by the attached deed. No authorization has been given for listing or sale. Any representation otherwise by your agents would constitute serious ethical violations. I trust you'll investigate this matter promptly." The letter was sent certified mail on a Thursday. By Monday morning, I had a response not from Webb, but from Blue Key's legal counsel, requesting a meeting. Meanwhile, Derek's pressure intensified. He'd printed the DocuSign agreement, left it on the kitchen counter with a pen, started talking about moving dates, forwarding me listings for rentals in Cherry Creek while we looked for the perfect upgrade. His performance of a husband planning a future was almost convincing, if I hadn't seen the photos of him touring those same rentals with Sloane. "The buyers need an answer," he said over breakfast Wednesday morning. "Sloane says they're looking at other properties." "Let them look," I said, not lifting my eyes from my coffee. "What's your problem?" His mask slipped for just a moment. "This is 20% above market. We'd be stupid not to take it." The word hung between us like a blade. "I want to review the title documents first," I said evenly. "Make sure everything's clean." Say, Derek's coffee mug hit the counter hard enough to slosh. "Jesus, Mara, it's our house. What's there to review?" "Our house." I smiled into my cup. Just being thorough. Caleb's final report arrived that afternoon. Derek and Sloane at the title company, attempting to open escrow. The escrow officer explaining they needed both owners' signatures. Derek's response, caught on the lobby security camera's audio. My wife will sign. I handle the finances. She'll do what I tell her. She'll do what I tell her. I forwarded the audio file to Janine with a single word, perfect. The broker in charge meeting was scheduled for Friday. The compliance review of Sloane's activities was already underway. The title company had flagged the file after receiving my notice of non-consent. Derek, meanwhile, was texting Sloane frantically. I watched the notifications pile up on his phone while he showered. She won't sign. We need a new plan. Maybe power of attorney. I thought about my grandmother, who'd worked as a bookkeeper for 43 years, saving every penny for the granddaughter she'd raised after my parents' accident. She'd have appreciated the careful documentation, the patient waiting, the moment when numbers on a page became justice. You get them with paperwork, she used to say. Paperwork doesn't lie, doesn't forget, doesn't forgive. Derek thought he was selling a house. What he was really doing was building a case against himself, one document at a time. The locksmith arrived at 8:15 a.m. on Saturday while Derek was at his monthly golf game with clients or so his calendar claimed. I'd verified with Caleb that he was actually at Sloane's condo in Louisville, his Audi visible in her guest parking spot. Every lock, I told the locksmith, handing him my ID and the deed. Doors, garage, side gate, new keys, new codes. The sound of drilling filled the house, each grind of metal on metal marking a boundary Derek hadn't known existed. The locksmith worked methodically front door, back door, French doors to the deck, the door from the garage to the kitchen. Each old lock dropped into his bag with a satisfying thud. Security upgrade, he asked, installing the new smart lock on the front entrance. Something like that. By 10:45 a.m., my house was mine alone. 6 new keys sat on the kitchen counter, catching the morning light. I photographed them, sent one image to Janine with the message, Phase 1 complete. Derek's belongings filled 3 sides of the garage by noon. I'd worked systematically, room by room. His clothes folded into banker's boxes, labeled with Sharpie D, Lawson Personal. His gaming console, wrapped in bubble wrap. The watch collection he thought I didn't know about, each piece in its original box. The golf clubs he'd upgraded twice in 3 years. Everything documented, photographed, treated with more care than he'd shown our marriage. I sealed each box with packing tape, creating a chain of custody even Janine would admire. Posted signs on them. Property of Derek Lawson, available for pickup by appointment. Contact through counsel. The financial separation happened in clicks. Our joint checking became mine alone. I was the primary account holder anyway. Canceled his card on the account I used for household expenses. Moved my direct deposit to the new First Bank account. Changed the password on our investment portfolio, though Derek had never once logged in during our 7 years of marriage. The HOA property manager was next. A brief email with the deed attached. Please update your records. I am the sole owner and only authorized resident. Any access requests should come directly to me. By 2 p.m., I'd updated the security company, the landscaping service, the house cleaner. Each conversation the same. I'm updating our records. Only I should be listed as authorized for the property. Janine had prepared a comprehensive packet that I now arranged on the dining room table like evidence in a courtroom. The deed, highlighted where it showed sole ownership, the trust documents, the notice of non-consent filed with the county, bank statements showing my inheritance as the down payment source, tax records where Derek had happily let me claim the mortgage interest deduction because it saved us money. You're building a wall of paper, Janine had said. Each document is a brick. The cease and desist letter to Sloane was particularly satisfying. Janine had crafted it with surgical precision. You are hereby notified that any attempt to list, market, or facilitate the sale of the property constitutes tortious interference with property rights. Any documents you've prepared should be preserved as evidence. My phone buzzed at 3:20 p.m. Derek, from the golf course or Sloane's bed. Home for dinner. Thought we'd try that new place on Walnut. I texted back. Your belongings are in the garage. New locks installed. Please arrange pickup through your attorney. The phone rang immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Rang again. Voicemail. The third time. I answered. What the hell? Mara, is this about the house I told you the buyers? Derek. My voice was steady as the mountains outside my window. The house is not for sale. It has never been for sale. It will not be for sale. You can't just check the deed, check the trust, check your assumptions. We're married. Colorado is a community property. Equitable distribution state, actually, and inherited assets remain separate when properly maintained, which mine were. Silence. I could hear his breathing, the sound of a car door slamming in the background. If this is about Sloan, it's about fraud, Derek. Attempted fraud. Your attorney can explain the details. I hung up, blocked his number. The house felt lighter already, as if his deception had been a physical weight on the rafters. At 4 p.m., I sat in my grandmother's reading chair, the one piece of furniture I'd brought from her apartment, and watched the afternoon light paint the mountains gold. The new keys sat on the side table, each one a small declaration of independence. Derek would come home to find his key wouldn't work. He'd see his belongings through the garage window. He'd understand, finally, that the ground he'd built his plans on had never been his to break. The house was quiet except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, another inheritance. Another thing Derek had never thought to ask about. It had been marking time for 60 years, would keep marking it long after Derek became just another story about a man who'd assumed too much. The escrow office occupied the third floor of a glass building on Canyon Boulevard, all polished surfaces and fluorescent certainty. I arrived at 10:55 a.m. for the 11 o'clock closing Derek had scheduled without my knowledge. Janine walked beside me, her heels clicking a warrior's rhythm on the marble floor. Derek was already there in the conference room, seated next to Sloan, who wore a red dress that belonged in a cocktail lounge, not a title company. Across from them sat a young couple, the supposed buyers, clutching a folder and looking eager. At the head of the table, the escrow officer arranged papers with practiced efficiency. Mara. Derek stood, his smile tight. I didn't think you were coming. Wouldn't miss it, I said, taking the chair at the opposite end of the table. Janine sat beside me, placing her leather portfolio on the glass surface with a deliberate weight. Sloane's confidence flickered. Mrs. Lawson, so glad you could make it. We're just reviewing the final paperwork. Ms. Whitaker, I corrected. I never took his name. The room's temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. The escrow officer looked up from her documents, sensing the shift. Derek recovered quickly, sliding a stack of papers toward me. Just need your signature on the settlement statement and deed transfer. Standard stuff. I didn't touch the papers. Instead, Janine pulled a folder from her portfolio and placed it on the table. Before any documents are signed, we need to establish ownership. Ownership! Sloane's voice pitched higher. Derek said, what Derek said and what's legally accurate appear to be different things. Janine removed the deed, the trust documents, laying them out like playing cards. The property is held in the Whitaker Living Trust. Ms. Whitaker is the sole trustee and beneficiary. The escrow officer reached for the deed, studied it, then looked at her computer screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Our title search shows, yes, Whitaker Living Trust, sole ownership. She turned to Derek. Sir, you're not listed on the deed. Derek's face flushed. That's a technicality. We're married. Colorado law. Makes inherited property separate unless commingled? Janine interrupted. The property was purchased with Ms. Whitaker's inheritance. The trust was established before purchase. Mr. Lawson's name appears nowhere on the title. The buyers exchanged nervous glances. The husband spoke first. We were told this was a straightforward sale. You were told wrong, I said, finally looking directly at Derek. There is no sale. There never was. Sloane stood, her composure cracking. Derek assured us he had authority, based on what Janine asked. Did you verify ownership pull title or did you simply take his word? The door opened. Harrison Webb, Blue Key Realty's broker in charge, entered with the firm's compliance officer. Webb was exactly what you'd expect, silver-haired, dark suit, the kind of gravitas that came from 30 years in real estate. "Ms. Avery," he said quietly, "we need to speak. Now." "We're in the middle of—" "No." Webb cut her off. "You're not. This transaction is void. We received notice 3 days ago that Ms. Whitaker is the sole owner and has not authorized any sale." The compliance officer stepped forward. "We've also discovered you've been preparing documents for unauthorized signings, discussing backdating contracts, and representing yourself as the listing agent for a property you had no right to market." Derek stood so fast his chair rolled backward. "This is insane. Mara, we can discuss this at home." "Your belongings are in the garage," I said. "Your key won't work. Don't come to my house." "Our house." "No." I pulled out my phone, showed him a photo of the deed. "My name, my trust, my house. You just assumed otherwise." The buyers were already backing toward the door, the wife muttering about finding another agent. The escrow officer was on her phone, likely with legal. Webb had Sloan by the elbow, guiding her toward the exit while the compliance officer collected the fraudulent paperwork from the table. Derek stood alone in the center of the room, his perfect plan in pieces around him. "You set me up?" "You set yourself up," I replied. "I just declined to correct your assumptions." Janine added the final blow, sliding a manila envelope across the table to him. "Separation agreement. Financial disclosure required within 30 days. And Derek." She waited until he looked up. "The attempted fraud has been reported to the Division of Real Estate and the DA's office for review." His face went white. Sloan, from the doorway, looked back at him with dawning recognition she'd tied her career to a man who didn't even own what he was selling. "I thought we had something," Derek said, his voice smaller now. "We did." I stood, gathering my documents. "I had a house. You had assumptions. Now you have neither." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Janine and I left the conference room. Behind us, Derek sat down heavily in his chair, the closing documents still spread across the table's signature lines that would never be filled, a sale that would never close, a future he'd planned without permission to build. The small conference room at the title company felt airless after the main group dispersed. Just Derek, Janine, and me around a table meant for 6. The overhead light buzzed with the specific frequency of spaces where bad news gets delivered. Derek tried 3 different approaches in the span of 10 minutes. First, denial. "This is a misunderstanding. The trust was just for tax purposes. We bought that house together." Janine pulled out bank statements, highlighted lines glowing yellow under the fluorescence. "Ms. Whitaker's inheritance, deposited 3 months before purchase. Down payment amount matches exactly. Your name appears on no checks, no transfers, no documentation." "I paid the mortgage, half the mortgage," I corrected, "which was less than market rent for comparable properties. I have 7 years of records showing my payments for taxes, insurance, HOA fees, and maintenance." Then came blame. "You're destroying our marriage over paperwork, over some technicality." "You destroyed our marriage by trying to sell my house to fund your new life with Sloan." I placed Caleb's surveillance photos on the table, fanned out like a losing hand. Tuesday at the Flagstaff house, Thursday at the Boulderado. Every showing that was actually a date. His jaw worked silently, eyes darting between the photos. Finally, desperation. "Mara, please, we can work this out. Couples therapy. Whatever you want. Just call off the lawyers." "What I want," I said, standing, "is for you to leave my house by 5 p.m. today. Your belongings are packed and accessible via the garage keypad code 4589. Expires at 6 p.m. After that, any remaining items will be considered abandoned." "You can't just evict me," Janine intervened with practiced calm. "Actually, given the attempted fraud and Colorado's domestic relations statutes, Ms. Whitaker has been remarkably generous. The alternative involves restraining orders and criminal prosecution. I placed a single sheet of paper in front of him. Temporary separation agreement. You acknowledge no ownership claim to the house. In exchange, I don't pursue fraud charges. Yet. Derek's hand shook as he read. This says I have to maintain separate residence immediately. Your problem, not mine. What about my clothes? My office setup? In the garage, labeled and inventoried. I slid him another paper. Sign here to acknowledge receipt. He signed with the anger of a child forced to apologize, the pen digging grooves in the paper. From the hallway, we could hear Webb still lecturing Sloane. Phrases drifted through the door: license suspension, ethics violation, potential criminal liability. She didn't know, Derek said suddenly. About the deed. I told her we owned it together. Then you defrauded her too, Janine observed. She might be your next legal problem. As if summoned, Sloane appeared in the doorway, Webb behind her. Her red dress looked garish now under the harsh lights, her confidence replaced by something sharp and calculating. You told me you owned that house, she said to Derek, her voice low and dangerous. You said your wife was just being difficult about signing. We do own it. No. Webb interrupted, holding up his phone. I just confirmed with county records. Whitaker Living Trust. Sole ownership. You've exposed my agent and this brokerage to significant liability. Sloane's face cycled through emotions: betrayal, rage, fear. I could lose my license because of you. Internal review starts Monday. Webb told her. Bring your files, all communications, everything related to this attempted transaction. She turned to me, perhaps looking for sympathy. Woman to woman. She found none. You scheduled showings at my house without my permission, I said. Prepared documents for property you never verified. Slept with my husband while planning to take a commission on stealing my home. I didn't know. Professional standards required you to know. Due diligence isn't optional. Derek reached for Sloane's hand. She jerked away as if burned. Don't. My lawyer will be contacting yours about recovering damages for misrepresentation. The room felt smaller with each passing moment, the walls closing in on Derek's delusions. He looked between us, his wife, his mistress. The lawyers finding no allies. 5 p.m., I reminded him. Code expires at 6. Janine and I left them there. Derek slumped in his chair, Sloane typing furiously on her phone, probably searching for her own attorney. The escrow officer stood in the main area, shaking her head as she voided the transaction in her system, each keystroke undoing weeks of Derek's planning. In the elevator, Janine finally smiled. That was surgical. That was necessary, I corrected, watching the floors count down to the lobby. He thought he could sell my house. Instead, he sold out his own future. The bolder sunshine felt cleaner when we stepped outside, the mountains sharp against the October sky. Somewhere in that building, Derek was learning what happened when assumption met documentation, when betrayal met preparation. By 5 p.m., he'd be gone. By 6 p.m., even the garage code would forget him. The October wind carried the scent of coming snow as Derek stood on my front porch at 4:47 p.m., his Audi packed with boxes from the garage. The security guard from our HOA waited in his vehicle at the curb, a witness I'd requested to ensure a peaceful transfer. Derek held the last banker's box against his hip, his wedding ring still on his finger, though mine had been in my jewelry box since that morning. Behind him, the mountains caught the late afternoon light, indifferent to human dramas. This is really it, he asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I stood in my doorway, my hand on my door handle of my house, and nodded. The new locks gleamed bronze in the fading light. Why did you let me go so far? He shifted the box, something inside rattling probably his cufflinks. Why not stop me the first time I mentioned selling? Would you have listened? I might have. You scheduled a showing during my strategy session. You texted your mistress about our sale while lying next to me. You tried to forge my signature on a DocuSign. I kept my voice level, factual. You weren't going to listen until you had to. He looked past me into the house, at the entryway he'd walked through thousands of times, the kitchen where we'd shared morning coffee, the living room where we'd planned a life that had slowly become a lie. I earned this house too, he said. One last attempt at revision. 7 years of what living in a house my grandmother's money bought, paying less than market rent while I covered everything else. I pulled the deed from my pocket. I'd been carrying it for days, knowing this moment would come. Your name was never on it, Derek. Not once. He stared at the paper as if seeing it for the first time. Maybe he was. Sloane's suing me, he said suddenly. Says I misrepresented the asset, cost her a commission and maybe her license. Consequences, I said. They're what happens when lies meet paperwork. A text buzzed on his phone, probably his lawyer or his new landlord, or maybe another woman who didn't yet know he'd promised things that weren't his to give. He didn't check it. For what it's worth, he said. The house wasn't really about the money. I just thought, if we moved, started fresh somewhere new, maybe things could be different. Things were different. You were sleeping with our realtor. He flinched, adjusted the box again. I meant between us. There is no us. I stepped back, preparing to close the door. There's just you, standing outside a house you tried to steal, and me, inside the house I've always owned. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to argue, maybe to try one more angle, but the security guard tapped his horn lightly, a professional reminder that time was up. The garage code expires in 12 minutes, I said. Derek walked to his car, loaded the last box, and stood for a moment looking up at the house. From his angle, he could probably see the bedroom window, the deck where we'd planned that never-built renovation, the roof that needed replacing next spring, details of a life he'd gambled and lost. He got in his Audi and drove away. No dramatic pause at the curb, no last look back, just taillights disappearing around the bend, heading toward whatever rental he'd scrambled to find, whatever story he'd tell himself about why his marriage ended at a closing table for a sale that never existed. I stood in my doorway until his car disappeared completely, then went inside and turned the deadbolt. The click echoed through the entryway, such a small sound to mark such a large ending. But then again, everything had been about small sounds, the buzz of late-night texts, the whisper of babe at an open house, the scratch of pen on paper as he tried to sign away what wasn't his. The house felt different now, not empty, but complete. Mine in a way it had always been, but now fully claimed. I walked to the kitchen, made myself tea in the quiet, and watched the mountains turn purple in the dusk. Somewhere out there, Derek was learning to live with the consequences of assumption. Sloane was probably consulting with attorneys. The buyers were touring other houses with more honest agents. And I was home, in my grandmother's gift, protected by paperwork and patience, by the kind of careful planning that ensures when someone tries to take what's yours, they discover it was never theirs to take. The deed sat on my counter, just a piece of paper really. But paper, as my grandmother knew, as Derek learned, can be stronger than promises, more solid than assumptions, more final than a door closing behind someone who thought he had the key. The lock held, the house stood, and possession, it turns out, isn't 9/10 of the law. It's everything when your name is the only one that counts. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just knowing who really holds the deed.